On 9/11, New York City lost 343 firefighters at the World Trade Center. Since they were the ones inside the towers before and as they collapsed, I'd say they've got a pretty good grasp on what happened. So what does the FDNY think?
We made it at least 2 blocks, and we started running. Floor by floor, it started popping out.
It was if they had detonated.
Detonated.
Planned to take down a building. Boom, 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 boom.
All the way down.
And the lobby looked as though a bomb had exploded there. All the glass was taken out. There were 10-foot by 10-foot marble panels that were once walls. They were loose from the wall of the Trade Center.
I went around by the freight elevator and I could see it was just blown. It was just a giant ship. 30th floor. We hear another explosion. And at that time we heard a huge explosion.
For more than a year, the Port Authority blocked the release of a tape of firefighters' transmissions from the World Trade Center on 9/11. In November 2002, the tape was finally released to the New York Times and other news outlets. Why did it take so long to get the tape released?
I got an eyewitness who said there was an explosion on floor 7-8. 7-8. We just had another explosion. Warren Street because of the secondary explosion. We've got numerous people covered with dust from the secondary explosion. And we got another explosion on the tower, 1013. Number 2 has had a major explosion and what appears to be a complete collapse surrounding the entire area. Who's involved in the secondary explosion at Tower 1K? I've got
This looks like one of those planned implosions.
As if a demolition team set off. When you see the old demolitions of these old buildings, it folded down on itself and it is not there anymore.
If you wish to bring anybody who's ever watched a building being demolished on purpose knows that if you're going to do this, you have to get at the under infrastructure of a building and bring it down.
We heard another explosion, and I'm assuming that's the one that came from the lower level, since there were 2. And I
right, because it was like 18 minutes apart.
Well, this is the first explosion, and there was a second explosion in the same building. There were 2 explosions.
Okay.
Federal agencies that were down there do believe that there was some sort of explosive device somewhere else besides the plane.
2 or 3 similar huge explosions, and the building literally shook. You literally shook at the base of this building.
First one and then the other. Some say after secondary explosions.
When a big explosion happened, all of a sudden the elevator blew up.
Tell us what's happening out there.
We just witnessed some kind of secondary follow-up explosion on the World Trade Center number 2, the one.
Secondary.
We understand now there has been a secondary explosion on Tower 2.
There was another major explosion.
When I tried to tell people in a moment, we heard a big explosion coming down.
Just we saw some kind of explosion, a lot of smoke come out of the top.
John, just seconds ago there was a huge explosion, and it appears right now the second World Trade Tower has just collapsed.
One eyewitness was standing among a crowd of people on Church Street, 2.5 blocks from the South Tower, when he saw a number of brief light sources being emitted from inside the building between floors 10 and 15. He saw about 6 of these flashes, accompanied by a crackling sound before the tower collapsed. Ginny Carr was attending a business meeting on the 36th floor of One Liberty Plaza, across the street from the World Trade Center, and caught the entire first attack on tape. A second explosion can be heard 9 seconds after the crash.
It sounds like something crashed.
So what happened in the North Tower? Ask Willie Rodriguez. Willie, a janitor who worked in the World Trade Center for 20 years, was in sub-level 1 when the North Tower was hit.
And all of a sudden we hear boom! I thought it was a generator that blew up on the basement. And I said to myself, oh my God, I think it's a generator. And I was going to verbalize it. When I finished saying that in my mind, I hear boom! Right on the top, pretty far away. So it was a difference between coming from the basement and coming from the top. And that's, everybody started screaming, and a person comes running into the office saying, explosion, explosion, explosion. There were many explosions, and when I actually talk about those explosions, they said that, well, there were so many kitchens in the building, and they have probably those gas canisters. And I say, I don't believe that because the building was a Class A building. There are very strict guidelines of what you can put in a kitchen. And I really doubt it was gas.
The windows in the lobby of the North Tower were blown out, and marble panels were blown off of the walls.
After the aircraft impacted, whether in fact there wasn't something else at the base of the towers that in fact were the coup de grace to bring them to the ground.
Construction worker Philip Morelli was in North Tower sub-basement 4 at the time of the first plane strike.
I go downstairs, the foreman tells me to go to remove the containers. As I'm walking by the main freight car of the building, in the corridor, that's when I got blown. I mean, the impact of the explosion, of whatever happened, it threw me to the floor, and that's when everything started happening. I was racing, I was going towards the bathroom. All of a sudden, I opened the door, I didn't know it was a bathroom, and all of a sudden a big impact happened again, and all the ceiling tile was falling down, the light fixtures were falling, swinging out of the ceiling, and I come running out the door, and everything, the walls were down, and now I started running towards the parking lots. There was a lot of smoke down there, there was a lot of people screaming. People came with us running up the ramps.
Philip then ran underground to the South Tower.
You know, you got to go clear across the whole from 1 to 2 World Trade Center. You know what I mean? That's the way you got to run. And then all of a sudden it happened all over again. Something else hit us to the floor. Right in the basement, you felt it. Walls were caving in, everything that was going on. I mean, I know of people that got killed in the basement.
On July 28, 1945, a B-52 bomber lost in the fog crashed into the 79th floor of the Empire State Building. 14 people dead, $1 million in damage, but the building stands intact to this day. On February 14, 1975, a 3-alarm fire broke out between the 9th and 14th floors of the North Tower. According to the New York Times, the fire leads to intense scrutiny of the towers and eventually to a decision to install sprinklers. On May 4, 1988, a 62-story skyscraper in Los Angeles burned for 3 hours and spread over 4 floors. It did not collapse. On February 23, 1991, a 38-story skyscraper in Philadelphia, built in 1973, burned for more than 19 hours and spread over 8 floors. It did not collapse. On October 17, 2004, a 56-story skyscraper in Venezuela, built in 1976, burned for over 17 hours and spread over 26 floors, eventually reaching the roof. Guess what? It did not collapse. And yet, on September 11, 2001, two 110-story skyscrapers, completed in 1973, burned for 56 and 103 minutes, respectively, over 4 floors, before collapsing completely to the ground. If only we could examine the debris from the World Trade Center and figure out what happened. Unfortunately, Mayor Giuliani began shipping the remains off to recycling yards overseas before investigators could even examine it. Not even FEMA was allowed into Ground Zero. Essentially, they blocked off a crime scene and destroyed all the evidence. Guess who was allowed into the site? Controlled Demolition, who was also responsible for cleaning up after the Oklahoma City bombing in 1995.
He told us the operatives had been instructed to ensure that the explosives went off at a point that was high enough to prevent people trapped above from escaping. He told us the operatives had been instructed to ensure that the explosives went off at a point that was high enough to prevent people trapped above from escaping.